Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Artcasters number 382. We've got an interesting one today. And in those 381 past episodes that we've done, we've never talked about this topic in all our talk about comics. So this should be interesting. And we'll talk a little more than just the topic that you see on your screen, because we have an interesting guest with an interesting project that he's working on. So we'll get to him. But first, we'll do what we always do, kind of go around the room. And as you can see, even though we're on Josh's channel, Josh isn't here. We don't know where he is. We're testing out this new Sunday thing. So it's possible. Sometimes Josh, if anyone that watches Josh knows that he works like all hours of the day, so it's possible he may have took a nap and not woke up. So that's typically when he doesn't show up. So maybe he'll roll in here a little later, but we didn't want to make you guys wait any longer. So let's get it off. I'll kick it off and I'll introduce myself. So I'm Scott Circlin. You can find my stuff at my YouTube channel at Circworks Art Labs on YouTube, where you will find basically what I'm doing right now is I am reverse engineering nostalgia from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I've got some really cool videos on there. If you haven't seen those, definitely check those out. And there'll be another one coming out on Tuesday. Really fun stuff. And if you're a comic fan, if you're wanting to learn how to write and draw comics and all that stuff, I also have a series on my YouTube channel called Making Comics 101, and it's pretty much the most comprehensive course there is on YouTube. And then it's funny, I was watching Proco. Is it Proco? Yeah, I don't know if you know Proco. He's a pretty big YouTuber. Well, he's doing a partnership with Marvel where he's doing a how to draw comics. I'm like, okay, well, I might not have that title for much longer, but then I realized it's a paid course. So my course is still the most comprehensive free course that you're going to find on YouTube. So definitely check that out. Also, you can go to my website and I've got my comics on there, my comic book Young and the Dead. It's a kids versus zombie adventure story. Just think Goonies meets Night of the Living Dead. If that sounds interesting to you, you probably dig that. I've got 5 issues available, working on the 6th and final issue now. And I've got a bunch of other stuff up there, including digital products that will help you make comics digitally. So check all that stuff out. And I'm going to kick it over to my friend Corey and see what he's got going on.
Yeah, as always, you can find my stuff at coreykerr.com, and I have finished a new design, Uncle Sam Buys Your Data, and there's a whole thing that goes along with that. So if you want to see kind of the essay of diving into some of the stuff that's been said by some of the generative AI guys to Congress, you can jump in there. And those are available on mugs, hoodies, t-shirts, laptop cases, flags, and other types of things. And so all of that's at coreykerr.com. And if you jump onto that email, coreykerr.com/email, then you can see those types of things.
And it looks like you got over your aversion to drawing bugs.
Yeah. When it makes sense, I do it. So yeah it's
funny.
We used to tease Corey because he used to like he would do full animation shorts and stuff, and they were all bug characters, and he was kind of the bug guy, so he didn't like to be pigeonholed, so he stopped drawing bugs for a while. But
it's not like a phobia situation.
It's a rebellious situation. I don't like being pigeonholed. But yeah, when we're talking about the government spying on us, I figure the bug wordplay was a useful double entendre there. So I dived back in.
All right, so let's get to our guest, Joe Worley, who has a Kickstarter coming out, and I'm going to let him talk a little bit about that and some of the. It's an anthology, and it's got some the way he approaches it is very interesting, and it's one of the stories includes Fumetti, which we're going to talk about what that is and kind of how that might set a whole different area of challenges, and maybe open up comics to some people who maybe aren't illustrators or whatever. But we'll get into that. But first, I want to introduce Joe. And so, Joe, let us know where people can find you. Anything that you want to promote. Obviously, the Kickstarter, and there is a link to Joe's Kickstarter in the description of this video, so you can check that out. But go ahead, Joe.
Oh yeah, you can find me just Joe Worley Art on all the social media platforms, and specifically for this project, it's a death_itself_comic on kind of Instagram is the kind of my main like flow of information, other than the Kickstarter itself, which is Death Itself comic on Kickstarter, and link, as you said, the links below. And um, basically, this project kind of started out as sort of a zine idea I was doing with one of my friends, and then it eventually evolved into more of a horror anthology comic book. And we kind of wanted to kind of have a diversity of different stories, different narrative structures, different visual styles, and kind of bring it all together in a wide variety of different artists, different styles all together in one place for a horror anthology, and just have that be what ties it together. Everything's in black and white, so that further, I think, ties everything together and makes it seem more cohesive as a whole. And this one has 3 stories in it. We have I worked with a couple other artists, or a couple other authors, and a photographer on one of the stories, which is the one that he mentioned would employs Fumetti, which I definitely didn't have to Google that word when he approached me with the topic.
Corey did. Corey had to ask me what it was, and it does kind of have 2 meanings. So, I mean, there is actual. I mean, Fumetti is basically just comics in Italian, but there's a certain kind of Italian comic that most people associate outside of Italy associate Fumetti with. So, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could talk. I could talk a little bit more about the other stories, unless you.
Yeah, please.
That one. The first story in this it was a collaboration between me and a guy I know here in town, Johnny Leach. He's a kind of comic book writer, is kind of his passion, and so we kind of collaborated on a story about which I did the illustrations. This was back when it was just going to be a zine phase, but I did the art, of course, bigger, so we could just plop it over into the anthology. But it's a kind of a story about a guy who makes a deal with a sort of demonic entity, and kind of the consequences of that, and it kind of takes some interesting twists. And I just illustrated that kind of in my style. And then the other story I did with it's not really a story, it's a collection of poetry I did with Kevin Rabus, which is another guy here in town. He just happened to live here in town. He was the poet laureate for Kansas one year, and his wife taught a class at the gym, the Zumba class. My wife took the class, and we kind of just hooked up that way, and started talking. And he does poetry, kind of freestyle, loosey-goosey style poetry, kind of like not really in like a typical form that you would see in poetry. And so I kind of thought it'd be cool to incorporate like a poetry collection as one of the stories within this book. And I did some spot illustrations for that. And then the third story I did with Nikki Rocco, which is a photographer out of Wichita, Kansas, that I know, and just thought it would be cool to incorporate Fumetti into the book. Photos, just totally photos, no illustration, just kind of, slightly manipulated photos, basically. And that story is about a kid that is going to find his watch, but then he kind of falls into another world, and he finds that he's not alone in this world, and he has to use his courage and wits to try to escape back to the normal world, and kind of gets into some adventures there.
That's awesome. So I definitely want to dive into that. So you said you didn't have to Google it. So what's kind of your experience with like Fumetti? Because my experience, as a kid, and I went and looked for this in my comics and I couldn't find it. And I've never given away any of my comics or thrown away any of my comics. But I had one called the Marvel Fumetti book, and it had Stan Lee on the front cover, and it was just basically the Marvel bullpen, and they put a bunch of stuff. And I remember that was my first introduction to Fumetti comics. And then also there was a monthly magazine. It was just kind of like a thing promoting Marvel called Marvel Age, and a lot of times they would have that in there too. So and then Corey, was it you brought up that National Lampoons does that quite a bit too, or?
Yeah, I didn't read Lampoons as a kid, but they there was a documentary.
Oh yeah, I did see that.
And
Yeah,
they seem to have that
yeah,
style of thing, and I think I've seen some of that in like Mad and Cracked and some of those, and so it's kind of appeared in the humor,
yeah.
in the humor genre for a while.
And that's the interesting thing, I think, is most of the times when I've seen it done, it is humor, but Joe is doing it in a horror comic, which is pretty
Mm-hmm.
interesting. I mean, I think your book is very original. From you sent me the PDF and everything, and from the integration of poetry, the illustrated story, and then of course this one that uses Fumetti. So let me know a little bit about your history with that and why you decided to use that in your comic book.
Okay. Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm going to have to come clean in case the sarcasm wasn't coming across. I actually did have to Google that word
Oh, okay,
when you sent me
okay.
the
It came across, yeah.
topic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Came
Yeah,
across.
I was.
But the reason kind of I incorporate, I mean, the only kind of like inkling that I had of photographs used in comic books is like manga. They kind of, they graphic, they kind of drop out the levels and use that for
Mhm.
backgrounds
Mhm.
from photographs. So that was kind of the only like reference point I had. But I just thought I just wanted to the where the photographic style comes from is that I wanted to bring as much kind of visual diversity to things, and I have this photographer friend, and she has like these mannequins in her studio that are kind of always looming there, looking creepy, and kind of the story kind of generated in my mind, and but uh, yeah, that's kind of where that all came from, but. I could talk about the kind of the process we went through.
Yeah, that's
Like,
I'm really interested in like do you reach out to people to be acters in it? I mean, how does all that come together?
okay, so what we did is she has a 10-year-old kid, and my at the time 1-year-old, he was the other
Uh-huh.
character in this, and so that posed its own problem of wrangling these two kids to try to get them for each photo session, which I thought like, okay. Um, Making a comic book with photos, that should be pretty easy, right? You just you take the pictures, you don't got to draw anything, just bloop bloop, take the pictures. And so I'm going to tell you, it was way harder than just drawing.
Yeah.
You have to get like the exact pose, and you have to your face is doing something weird, your emotions are looking all weird, like that's not the way we want it. And so it was definitely it was fun, but it was a challenge in that regard. And because of kind of the design of the story, he kind of falls into a blanket cave is what I call it. But it's kind of like this cave, and so we could make it of, we don't have to like make any like sets or anything other than
Yeah.
like blankets and like basically junk that she had in her studio already, and stuff that I had. And then we kind of lay out the story, and even doing all that, kind of making it as easy as possible for herself. It was a difficult, it was difficult, but it was fun. We had a good time doing it. At least we did. I don't know about the kids, but
Yeah. Well, I imagine they probably got a kick. Well, at least the older one got a kick out of seeing the finished piece and everything.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So I mean that's interesting because it does it's a whole other set of challenges, because one of the things you say when you do comics is that you can pretty much do what you want, and you have an unlimited budget because you're just sure it takes time and everything, but you can draw you know, as soon as you're capable of it, you can draw pretty much whatever you want, set it anywhere you want. But if you were to actually film that, then you've got to figure out, okay, well, what are the sets and who are the actors and all this stuff. So and that's why I think in my history of any kind of Fumetti comics that I've read, it's usually been just like a lot of it's just like office settings. Like they take, like I
mm,
said, the marble bullpen, or where they'll take pictures of people, and then we'll put some funny captions and we'll build a story out of it. But to actually set all that up, it's almost like if you're going to do that, why not just do a film? So it's
right.
but yeah, it's interesting to kind of see that, because originally when I said, well, maybe if you're not that strong of an artist, and you want to do comics, that might be a way to go. But like I said, it's a whole other set of challenges that you have to take on in order to do that.
Yeah, my kind of role in this comic was kind of like I kind of came up with the story, and I just I thumbnailed it out and kind of figured out what shots we needed, and then did like bigger, sketch pages of kind of like really clear. Okay, he's looking this way. Like we want like an arm going up this way on this page, and I kind of was a director, I guess, capacity, and then I had my photographer. Um, she got a bunch. She got great shots, and she did all the real hard work. And then some shots, it was like, okay, we can't do this. We got to figure something else out. We got to move these panels around, and then we kind of did a lot of it kind of by the seat of our pants, for sure.
Yeah, and so once you have the photos and everything, and and basically, and you've got to kind of organize it and cut it all up. So I'm assuming you did. I'm gonna hold on. Let's see if I can pull this up here. I don't want to share your whole thing, but I do want to. I assume you did all the graphic design and everything on the book, right? Yeah, because I love the logo. I love the look of the book. Let me see if I can share that here. I think this is it. Let's see. No, that's not it. Let's see. Is that it? No, because somewhere in here. Okay. Here. Yeah. Let me. So I'll just kind of show the cover of the book here so everyone can see it. But yeah, so I love the layout design. I don't want to give too much away here. But it looks like you definitely have some strength in the graphic design department. So taking all that and putting that together, what does that process look like?
It's definitely a process. You noticed the graphic design. So my education background, I started in studio arts, did that for a while, and then was like, oh, I need to make a living. So I went to graphic design, as many do, and I think it's really helped me kind of like give me kind of a well-rounded approach to things in the realm of art. But with the underneath story, the one we were talking about, a lot of it was kind of like seeing the shots we got, and kind of seeing what I can use and what I can't use, and then going back and shooting again, and like figuring out what's feasible, and that sort of thing. Let's see, and with the other stories, take the poetry collection, Cryptid Lines. It's the kind of premise for that one was a collection of poetry about cryptids, mostly like Midwestern cryptids, Bigfoot, the Thunderbird, and all that. So for that one, I took the approach of like just brainstorming, like bouncing back and forth between the writer with the poetry and seeing, and I kind of like curated his poetry collection. Essentially, he just like was cranking out poems. He can just like crank them out super fast. So we kind of got a group of things together and kind of figured out which ones would work best together, and then kind of design the illustrations around the amount of poetry that fit well together. So those were just spot illustrations. So I did it that way, so it could be a little bit, so I could, adapt around his writing rather than have like a very like strict sort of layout. So that one was a little bit more fluid, kind of by design. And then the first one started out as a zine, so it was like most of the pages were just like one page panels, except for a few. I started like adding a few more panels on the later pages when I realized, okay, this is going to be more than just a zine. It's going to be a bigger comic, so we can get a little bit more crazy with it.
So say for the cryptid poetry, how was that? Did the poet, how familiar was the poet with these various cryptids and stuff? Did he kind of have to fill them in, or Or you just work together on that? How did that whole process go?
Oh, we excuse me. He I mean, he was relatively familiar with the cryptids, but he doesn't really do like a creepy style naturally.
Right.
So I kind of had to like work with him on like the tone of things,
Yeah.
like kind of like foreboding, like not necessarily, you don't have to be like, you know, like ripping the flesh apart or whatever, but something like, you know, kind of ominous, kind of, you know, and that was the main thing that I really had to kind of work with him and bounce back and forth on to get it kind of cohesive with kind of the other stories and kind of just the right tone. As you can see from the cover is a little bit tongue in cheek, a little bit, you know, cheeky, not necessarily like, oh, like like dreadful horror. It's like it's horror, but it's also, you know, kind of fun. It's kind of what I'm going for. It's not necessarily like just like nihilistic, like, you know, not necessarily that.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's what's your history with like horror anthologies, and why did you decide to kind of go in that direction? Because I know that's one of my favorite genres, whether it's film or whether it's comics or whatever, is horror comics, and I've been involved in a few different horror anthologies and everything. So
Hmm. Oh, I don't really have a history per se
yeah,
with horror anthologies, but I've got I've just for some reason I've randomly bought some DC comic. I think there were DC comics that they have, rather than having like you know, being like a, usually they have, you know, it's like the 100-page ones that have like a swamp thing of whatever or whatever.
yeah,
But I got one that was, it was a bunch of shorter stories that were themed around like soldiers, or there's been some other ones, but the one that I'm thinking of is, it was themed around like battles and soldiers. So it was just like random stories. It
yeah,
wasn't, you know, superheroes. It was just like really cool stories, and they all kind of like take on a different style. The one that was like totally watercolor, like just like pages of watercolor that was just like beautiful. And then there's just other ones that are, you know, just all these different styles that are kind of like that you wouldn't normally see in comics, that are kind of like
right,
mushed up together. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And they told such like great stories within, you know, within 4 to 8 pages. It's like, I was like, wow, like it would be really cool to do something like that. And that's kind of where the idea originated, not necessarily with horror, but I think the horror came in because this zine idea that kind of like grew into something. Like the zine was going to be horror, and that's kind of where it grew from what it was originally supposed to be.
so the original concept of the zine, um how long ago did you work on that? And I mean, were you sort of was that sort of your entry point into comics, is publishing zines, or
So I've published several other comics before. I tried to do the zine thing. The zine actually was supposed to release last Halloween, but then towards the end of the first story, that's when I decided, okay, I want to expand this and make it, you know, something bigger. So this one will be totally. I mean, the Kickstarter will end in like a week or so, but
yeah,
the actual book will come out in like October. That's when
perfect
it will
timing.
like go into stores and whatnot. But so that's kind of that. But as an as an adult, I've made I used to make comic books all the time as a kid,
Yeah,
like in high school and whatnot. But
yeah,
like as an adult, I've made several other comics. I've did like a political satire comic book, and a couple other ones that I won't mention. And then I've done like I did a comic book about a little mouse guy, which actually I'm working with a publisher, and that the second book of that, I actually just got done with that as well. Kind of like it was supposed to, you know, kind of like stagger a little bit, but I got done with both these books kind of at the same time. And that one will be one of two, and it's just, the comic book's called Mouse, and then it has like a subtitle with it. Like this one is the like mouse, not the German spelling, but like
right,
the
right,
American
yeah,
spelling.
yeah.
But,
That would get a little confusing.
yeah. Yeah, the first one was called, the subtitle was
Yeah,
The Hunt, and then
yeah.
this one is Bird's Eye View, and it's going to be a 2-book story arc. and so I'm done with the first book on that. And let's see, the publisher I'm working with is Literati Press, kind of a smaller. They have like a storefront in Oklahoma City. I just kind of randomly walked in there. One day we were doing a mural at the Chicken and Pickle down there, and we were looking for like a vegetarian restaurant because a couple of the crew are vegetarians. So we went down to this little cool arts district, and then put our reservation in for the restaurant, and kind of walked around, and we went over to this bookshop, and I noticed they have like a shelf of comic books. I noticed I did one of the variant covers for one of the
Oh,
comic books
cool.
that was up there, and I was like, hey, I did a cover for that. And I started talking with them, and they're like, oh, and I told them about my mouse comic, and they're like, oh yeah, send it over, we'll check it out. And then I started talking with them, and so I'm going to do at least 2 books with them, and they're going to publish it for me. So
Oh, that's cool. So it's a comic book shop, but they also publish. Is that
yeah.
or?
Oh,
Yeah, that's
it's a bookstore, comic book shop. Yeah.
okay. Yeah,
cool.
that's
They
pretty
have,
awesome.
I think they have 5 or 6 comic books that they've published, like in house. So
Yeah, I remember. I know. There's a history of comic book shops that have like. I think I'm trying to remember what it was. It was it. Oh, I can't remember. It's super. Oh, I think the Tick. I think the Tick was like it started off from like New England Comics, which was like a comic book shop, I believe, and it they just started publishing it. So there's definitely a history. That might be something to dive in on another show or something. The history of comic book shops publishing and stuff like that. But yeah, that's really cool. So in addition, and so you in the beginning of the show, off air, we were kind of talking about we already mentioned that you do graphic design. You kind of went to school for that. You're an illustrator, and you just mentioned you also do murals. So it just reminds me a lot because I've done a lot of this stuff too. So it's just kind of like, oh, he's kind of like a jack of all trades, and are kind of like experiencing all this stuff, and that comes in so handy when whatever it is you're doing that you can go. Because I'm always like, people are like, well, what do you do? Like, what kind of art? I'm like, so well, like right now I'm kind of doing this, but I've pretty much
yeah.
done everything. So yeah,
Yeah, you gotta keep hustling.
yeah.
It's like when I do caricatures, like there's like a season for that, and then when it gets cold, there's like 3 or 4 months, like can't really do much, and
Yeah.
when it's cold. So that's
So
where
yeah, you had mentioned that too. So is that like, do you do like corporate events and things, or do
yeah,
you do
corporate
like,
events.
yeah,
I go to Comic Cons. I
yeah,
go to art fairs. It's like all of the above, basically. And there's a lot of word of mouth that kind of goes around. Oh, we need a caricature artist for our wedding, and there's there. I used to be kind of the only guy in the Wichita area, but now there's a couple
yeah,
more. But that's okay.
yeah? Yeah, there's a documentary on caricatures. Oh, I think it's on YouTube. I don't know if you saw that, but it
Mhm.
just kind of it painted sort of a kind of a dreary picture of just like all the stuff that goes down with caricatures, like artists, and they were talking about how people would just get upset. They commission somebody to do a caricature and they get upset and they say, well, I'm not paying you to rip it up or whatever. I don't know if you've had any of those experiences.
No, nothing that dramatic. I
Yeah.
actually only had like one person really get upset to my face about the drawing, and it was for the weirdest reason. I was drawing them, and there was two ladies. It was at this brewery. This brewery was having like a 10-year anniversary or something party, and it was just hot. It was July. It was hot. I had a headache, and I didn't want to be there to begin with. But I drew these ladies, and I drew one of them like really with a giant head, and one of them like kind of popping out from behind, like really tiny. And I think she got mad that I drew her tiny for some reason. And I was like, okay. And I was like, weren't sure if they wanted it in color. So then after I showed them the black and white, and I was like, do you want color? And then she's like, no. But they still paid. So
Yeah. Okay. So you haven't had that crazy of an experience, but
yeah.
yeah, I had done a lot of caricatures in the past, but I never did like live caricatures where you sit, like somebody sits down and you draw them. It was always like, okay, we need a company Christmas card. We're going to do some
Mm,
caricatures. Send me some photographs, and then it's usually a lot of group stuff where I put it together. But it's been a while since I've done that.
yeah,
Yeah, but
it's
so
a
I've never.
it's a whole nother thing for
I'm
sure.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I gotta kind of like shift gears in my brain when I'm doing the live caricatures because I have like the comic book style that I do is totally different from that. It's
Right.
like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, so let's dive into. So you've got the Kickstarter going right now. Um, we've talked a little bit about we talked a little about the poetry. We talked a little bit about the Fumetti. So as far as the first story, you wrote and drew the first story, right?
No, the first story was actually it was adapted from a
Okay.
a short play written by Johnny Leach. This who he it was this wasn't originally meant to be a comic book, but he does write comic books as well. But he kind of adapted this for the purposes of this
Okay.
comic book
Cool.
because the original so kind of the process that I go through when at least with this one, hopefully there will be more books in the future and you know if the Kickstarter whether or not the Kickstarter is successful, hopefully it will be, and then kind of build on it next time. But there will be more books in the future. But the kind of process that I go through for getting a story has been in this one. I have a concept in my head, and I kind of approach somebody that I think would work well with
Okay.
it
Cool.
as far as collaboration, and then we kind of bounce back and forth. Like this one, um, my original concept was pretty far afield from what he ended up coming back with, and so um, so that is it's kind of, and I kind of added a little bit of my own like little things here and there just based on like things I could do visually and whatnot. And so it's kind of been an interesting experience for me. I don't know how closely either of you work with writers, or if it's just like a handoff thing when when
Well,
you do that.
yeah, that's one of the things that, like, I wish Josh was here. Who knows where? I don't know where he is, but yeah. So he does a little bit of what he writes and illustrates comics. But right now he's working on one that he's the illustrator, and
Mm,
he's partnering with the writer and creating it. So my experience is mostly as a writer artist. So that's interesting because I mean, you say I mean, in the past you've wrote and drawn your own comics. So when you approach this anthology and you decide, I mean, what was I guess the impetus behind, instead of, well, I'm just going to create an anthology myself. I'm going to look for talent. Is that just something different? You want to collaborate with different people, or?
yeah, I kind of there's multiple levels to that. One is, yeah, definitely I wanted to collaborate. I just didn't want to sit here and
Yeah.
make my own thing and like everybody look what I did. It's kind of like I kind of want to have that a little bit of the community, work with other
Hmm.
people because it can get kind of lonely just like sitting in here like do 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 do,
Right.
it's just working on my own thing. Um, but so there's that aspect of it, and then there's the aspect of I want it to be every story to have a different like feel or flavor or look or whatnot. Like there are in the future I have ideas for other stories that have totally different like visual looks.
Okay.
um,
I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
yeah, like there's like I haven't talked to her about this yet, but there's a girl here in town that she's a studio artist, but she also does like paper dolls, like
Okay.
makes paper dolls. So I was like, oh, that might be kind of cool to like do a photograph of like paper doll setups or something like that. That might be
Uh-huh.
kind of cool. But so maybe I think she's working on her like master's degree right now or something. So maybe after that's over.
Well, yeah. So that, you had mentioned that you're wanting to make a series out of this Death Itself after this first book, and you've kind of set a pretty high bar as far as the variety of comics in it. You know, you've got the poetry, you've got the illustrated story in the beginning, and then you've got the Fumetti style. So I was just curious if are you going to follow that same format in the next one, or are you going to do something totally different? But it sounds like you've got some ideas to just keep going with just really different techniques.
Yeah, the idea is to just keep doing
That's awesome.
different stuff for sure. Like another idea that me and my friend were kicking around. See, so this is how it worked with the original stories. I kind of like approached somebody, and then like my original idea is either a little bit different or totally different from what I originally thought it was going to be, which is kind of cool to me. Like the collaboration kind of makes something, totally unique and totally different. So another idea that I've me and one of my friends were kicking around is like a detective noir type story where a guy is like a paranormal detective, and he's like investigating this creature that's like lives in the inner city, and he's like investigating it, and it slowly like drives him insane. But the story will be told entirely through shots of his desk and like looking at his notebook, and like there's other like props on the desk.
Okay, cool.
So that was like something that we just came up with, like just bouncing around ideas like in the coffee shop one day. But
that's definitely, I mean, I would think that's a kind of a strong marketing point on your book, because there are so many diverse styles. So how do you, do you play that up in the Kickstarter, or as far as how you're marketing it, how you're pushing it out to people, is the difference in tones and art styles and everything?
Yeah. I don't know. This is my first Kickstarter, so I'm kind of just
right.
as I said, flying by the seat of my pants. Like, okay, let's just do it and see what happens. So I'm just like, writing everything, getting it all organized. It was like a whole new thing for me, and I like put out this video. It's a template, but still I had to do.
The video is great, by the way. Everyone definitely go check out the Kickstarter, check out the video, and I think you'll it really is a unique book. So definitely check it out. There's a link in the description. So Christopher Runsman says Detective Noir sounds fantastic. I could just see so many different directions you could go with kind of the anthology format and everything. And it sounds like you've got some cool ideas already. You could almost not that you want to repeat yourself, but you could almost do like a Fumetti comic that's I'm thinking back, like a Who Framed Roger Rabbit. You've got actual characters, and then you've got illustrations. There could be, I could see, some, you have your character photograph, but then falling into some weird world or something like that.
Yeah, that was actually the kind of original idea for the one we did, but we kind of, through the collaborative process, we decided to go in the other direction.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that would definitely be something I'd like to do in the future. It's just, you just got to find the right story for it and find the right people to collaborate. And ideally, in the long run, it'd be nice if I could just sit back and find okay, you're a writer, you're a artist, you guys work together on this story, and I just handle the design and putting it all together.
Yeah. That's also
it's a ways out.
Yeah, but you got to start somewhere, and that's also kind of approaching it, from a publishing standpoint, because you can because as an illustrator, that's usually the most time consuming thing. So if you can kind of pull in other resources, get other people involved, and that's one of the reasons why, like I said, I don't, other than my own comic, I don't do a lot of other projects, but every once in a while I will contribute to an anthology, because it's not a huge time investment. You get a lot of people together, and then usually if there's enough people involved, you can, you've got 3 stories, but I've worked on horror anthologies that had a number of stories and a number of artists and writers. So you get that many people, they kind of, you pull all those resources in, it's a little easier to promote. Of course, you're usually splitting that however many ways, but it gets out to more people, and sometimes that's the point. So, but it's always good when you can get whoever you're collaborating with, help push that out and get more eyes on it and everything. And then also, also with the, each issue you kind of build up a following and stuff like that. So it's definitely, there's just so many advantages to doing anthologies. So and again, I mean, I think you're doing something really unique with the format. So but what about, so you had mentioned that you've done like caricatures and stuff at comic conventions. So do you exhibit? Are you planning to taking what's the goal once you get the Kickstarter funded, and you get the books printed and everything? What's the next goal? Because it sounds like you already have, you've already got some in routes with some stores and things like that. Are you going to do the comic book circuit, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I'll definitely sell them in stores around the area. I don't know how far I'm gonna, or what stores, or how many, or all that type of stuff. I'll worry about that afterwards. But yeah, they'll definitely be out in stores. And I do all the kind of local Comic Cons from Oklahoma like to Kansas City. It's kind of my range as far as driving wise, but Planet Comic Con is kind of the biggest one that I go to usually. But yeah, I've been there the last 2 years, so I'll definitely be out there, and I will have some books for sure. I don't know. I could expand out. I don't know. We'll see how far I want to drive next year, I guess.
Right. So are you planning on, so this one's going to be released around Halloween time? Is that going to be like an annual thing? Are you going to try to put one of these out a year around Halloween time, or
that is the goal. That is the goal. So it's a whole a whole year of production on the book, and it's not super intensive because it's spread out over the whole year. It's only it's only a 24-page book. It does start to get to crunch time at some point, but it's not really too bad as far as the workload. And although I did get a little bit of a head start on this book because I was going to release that one around Halloween, but I think it's pretty manageable, I think.
Yeah, and it's always good. We always tell people if you're going to run a Kickstarter, it's always helpful if the book's pretty much complete, other than the printing and everything. Just because it just shows that, this book is actually going to happen. Because sometimes they don't. I've contributed to Kickstarters, and it's just like, okay, well, I don't know if this is actually going to get done or whatever. So, but yeah. So, but I don't, Corey. Did you have anything that you wanted to kind of add? Or
I'm kind of curious on why you're choosing these types of things. I mean, it's the cool thing about the world of art is you can do anything you want, and you've got a variety of things going on, from murals to everything else. Is it the sense of community? Is there something about comics themselves specifically, or what is it that's kind of driving you towards this medium?
Towards like the anthology type of setup.
Just like a comics anthology situation.
Yeah, definitely. It's I wanted to kind of bring, like, I don't know if it was after the pandemic or whatnot, being like kind of isolated so much for that year. It was just kind of being cut off. I guess that kind of set something off in my brain of like, I want to connect with more people, and you kind of like lose touch with people. And I graduated college in 2015, and so we kind of like all kind of kept in touch pretty well for a few years, and then a few people drop off, and then people move away, and you kind of keep in touch but not really. And then 2020 happened, and it's kind of like all of a sudden like everybody kind of goes their separate ways, and like maybe you talk to them, maybe you see them around, but probably not. So I think that might be kind of where would be what germinated the idea of doing a collaborative project, because there is that part of my brain that's like, oh no, I have to control this story. Oh no, that line's wrong. I have to control that. Like there is that, definitely that side of me of like wanting to just like hold on to the creative process and like
Yeah.
control everything. But it's been kind of nice just, like collaborating and like, okay, well, okay, maybe your idea works better here, and like kind of giving that more free flow of creativity has kind of been kind of interesting and rewarding, I think.
Yeah. So how have you found it? So I mean, that was kind of why you got into it. Have you found kind of that sense of community in the collaboration? How's that been?
Yeah, it's so this one was people that I already knew, but I didn't necessarily really hang out with a whole lot. But it was cool, like getting to know some of those guys better, and maybe even working on this with them will result in some future projects down the line. I know they've expressed interest in doing more, so we could and I have plenty of ideas. It's just a matter of time. Like, do I have the time to
Right.
invest in this or that project? Because just like getting a comic book started, I feel almost like paralyzed. Like, is this the right idea? Is this the one I want to work on? Like, because it's
Right.
like we'll be working on this for however long, and not these other things. So
Yeah, it is
Yes.
a bit of an opportunity cost situation. That was kind of why I asked the question, because I mean everything that we choose to do is at the cost of the other things that we could be doing with that time.
hmm
Um, so yeah, it's always a little tough. I don't know. The three of us have drastically different views on those types of things. Like Josh, who isn't here right now, he'll spend five years working on one book, and me on the other hand, I'm kind of, if I spend longer than a month on something, I start to get really antsy, and so my projects tend to be a little bit shorter. And Scott does a little bit of both. He kind of bounces
Yeah.
around and kind of
I mean,
mixes it
one
up.
long term thing that I just kind of work on in the background, my comic, and then the other stuff I have to do different things like Corey, like just to keep it interesting. I can't work on the same thing over and over again. So a little bit of both. It's nice to have that one steady kind of thing that I keep coming back to. But other than that, I've got to try different things out. But that's sort of the beauty of the anthology is that there's so many. I'm sure you have all these ideas, and then you're like, okay, well, how does this fit into that? And if it doesn't fit, then maybe we do a different anthology that's not a horror anthology or something else, or and then I mean, and you can. The cool thing is, especially if you're working with other artists and things like that, you can kind of do maybe some of that stuff simultaneously. Like, oh, okay, well, you kind of work on this project, and we're gonna focus on this over here, and just you kind of pull it all together. So you had mentioned that you had interest in some of the people that you worked with on this issue to do other projects. So in the same way that you're looking at doing different styles and things for future issues, are you also looking at using entirely different creative teams each time, or
Yeah, that is kind of the idea with
yeah,
the horror anthology, at least the getting different, just a different group of people every time. Maybe have a few people like come back, or maybe do like some like shorter ones, maybe so it's not necessarily just three, maybe because this one it was three,
yeah,
just the three in a 24-page book, but maybe there's more pages to the book. Maybe a couple of the stories are only like 4 pages, or maybe just like if it's a poetry section, it could just be like 1 or 2 pages, and that'll be just fine for that. But it's open definitely to for what the future holds. But yeah, the original idea was just three stories, or in this case a poetry collection per book, but obviously the ideas can change as things evolve. So
yeah. So you are looking to keep a poetry section in every issue.
oh, no,
Oh, okay, okay,
not necessarily.
okay. Yeah, I think that was my question. My follow-up question to that would have been, so because I mean, I don't. It's at least in my circles, I don't know a lot of poets, so having to like seek out if you're working with a different team, like, okay, well, who else can do kind of a horror poetry or whatever,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I
But
think oh man, I'm not gonna remember it now, but the thing that inspired me to do the horror poetry collection was this book my friend that he reads to his kid. It's
uh-huh,
horror poetry. It's just a horror poetry book that you read to your kids at bedtime.
that's cool.
If you're an insane person and want them to have nightmares, but his kid loves it. It's just like
Yeah, I know
I
some of those stories when I was a kid. Some of the stuff that freaked me out. I used to love because I was just a huge fan of Halloween and all that kind of stuff. So I always got. I mean, if it was, it depends on the theme. If it's a little creepy or something like that, that's cool. If it's like oh, it's people out here like murdering children or something, I might be
yeah,
like, oh,
it
yeah, I
was
don't know if
like
yeah.
it was like one of them was like this the shambling skeletons and they click
Yeah,
and they
yeah,
clack and
yeah.
there's definitely some eating of children that goes involved in
Well,
that
so yeah,
in that
I
book.
mean, there's always even like Maurice Sendak and stuff like that. There's like that threat of the alligator eating the kid or the wild
Mhm,
things or something like that. So,
mhm.
a little bit of that I think is kind of is healthy for kids. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, but yeah, that's interesting. And then you got the whole genre of like R.L. Stein and all that kind of stuff. I
Yeah,
mean, so yeah,
something that sticks
Goosebumps
out
and
in my mind from my childhood is my mom would read like uh, Rome, like Greek myths, like
yeah,
Cyclopses and all this stuff,
Hmm.
and
yeah,
they would have illustrations in there, like, oh, people just getting ate by
yeah,
these things. And it was like totally freaky to me as a kid.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we
yeah.
kind
So.
of there was a guy Bodler. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, but he went through in America and he went through Congress and he felt like he wanted to sanitize everything, and so he went
Mhm.
through and he rewrote Shakespeare plays to be really sanitized, specifically because he felt like the female gender couldn't handle stuff, and so he went through, and I can't remember what they were called, but it was like a really ridiculously sexist name. It's basically something like, the sanitized whatever for the modern lady or something like that. Anyway, just terrible. But now we've kind of gotten into this habit of like sanitizing and purifying. They call it Bowdlerizing. Um, these things that kids used to be fine with, like prior to kind of Disney
Right.
and Bowdler, we it's not like we were as a society like showing our children like pornography or anything,
Mm.
but the stories were not sanitized stories. I mean, you had things. If you look up the original fairy tales and stuff like that, those were told not just to children, but to everybody in the society, kind of as like moral warnings or as advice, or Aesop's fables kind of had some. And so there's all this stuff. And nowadays, I think we can be, especially with storytelling that doesn't have like hyper realistic, video or photography in it. If it's drawings or words, I think kids can handle, quite a bit. And
Yeah.
and and with books, they can just close it. Like if they're not into it, they can just be like, all right,
Yeah.
and kind of move on or whatever. It's kind of this kind of self censoring thing. But
One of my that kind of reminds me. One of my parents definitely didn't let me have this, but one of my grandmas would buy me comic books sometimes randomly. She just like, "Oh, there's a comic book, buy it for me." And one was like it was like I don't remember what it was, but it was like a Superman-like character with like he had white hair, and I just remember like this distinct image of him like going into this room with a bunch of guys with suits and just like chopping them up with his bare hands, like blood everywhere, like like
Was
thanks,
this
Grandma.
how long
that's
ago
funny.
was this in the 90s?
Yeah, in the 90s. Yeah, I
Is
don't
it might have been Supreme. I think he was sort of a superhero
maybe.
type guy with white hair. I don't know if he chopped people up, but so I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think of how I would kind of categorize your anthology because I was going to say I think it might be okay for kids, but then the first story kind of has kind of a gruesome ending, but it's also, I don't want to give it away,
Yeah.
but it's also in a style that's kind of like, I don't know, you might be able to get away with it, but like, and then you've kind of got in the Fumetti comic, you've kind of got kid protagonists and things like that. So I think it might be one of those that, it's sort of, yeah, it might. I don't know if it's all ages, but I think a lot of kids could probably handle it and will probably dig it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
What would you think? What would you think your target audience for this book would be?
Oh, probably you know 10 and up, 12, like early teen, something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't. The first story is like there's that gore aspect a little bit in it,
Right.
but there's also, I'm not gonna, without saying anything, there's kind of a comedic aspect to it that I kind of like see in it as well.
Right.
For me, it's like
dark humor,
horror and comedy, kind of almost like it's a fine line kind of situation for me sometimes, and that's kind of the way I look at it in my head. It's not like, oh my god, look at all this. It's kind of like kind of like a punchline almost to me. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of that. I think they sometimes they refer to it as the O. Henry ending. It's kind of like it's usually somebody who either opens a Pandora's box or crosses the line somewhere, and they usually get their just desserts type of thing. But that's kind of a staple of like a lot of horror anthologies, whether it's like Tales from the Crypt, whether it's the old EC comic. Well, I guess Tales from wasn't old EC comics, but like Creepshow and things like that. There's usually some kind of twist, or somebody kind of gets what's coming to them usually. And I've read some anthology. I think I forgot what company put it out, but they re-released they took the Creepshow brand, and then they made a comic, and I read the first issue, and there's one that was just like, I didn't get into it because it was like somebody kind of got sort of, in the end it wasn't a good ending for them, but it didn't seem like they deserved it. So, and I don't really like those stories as much. So I think I don't mind if somebody's like a little shady or something, and it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But that's that's sort of a trope within horror anthologies and stuff like that.
Sure.
But I think I think when I was a kid, I used to actually, I'm fusing two memories together. So as a kid, I used to get these little animal cards in the mail, and it would have all these facts and stuff like that. And when my kids were younger, I ordered the same kind of thing, but it was all like, it was basically monsters. They had like these little cards, and you get a stack of cards every month, and it would be like Greek monsters and cryptids and things, and they loved that stuff. They loved all these little facts and things, and there's so many of those out there that I just like, and to work the poetry into that, it's really cool to kind of, I really like the way that you crafted the book and everything. So
thanks.
Yeah, that brings back a lot of memories from that time. But yeah, I mean, my kids love that stuff, and adults too. So
I think the important thing is that people just kind of know what they're getting into.
Yeah.
Because, there's definitely things that, I mean, I've got 3 kids. There's definitely things that, I know are good or not good for each kid. And so I always appreciate kind of having a little bit of a heads up of like, this is what you can kind of expect in this. So you can kind of make those choices as parents.
Yeah. That's kind of something I was wondering about. How do you communicate that, like in a comic book, like if you don't like there's no cussing in it, but like if there was, like, how do you indicate that, like, oh, there's like 4 swear words in this comic or whatever?
Yeah, well, I know with like my book, because my book is a horror book. It's like zombies, but it's kids fighting zombies. So usually when I'm pitching the book, if they're saying it's for a kid, I'm like, well, it's kind of 80s PG, which nowadays might be PG-13. Like in the 80s, they didn't implement PG-13 until a while. So you can watch something like a Goonies or like a Monster Squad, and there'd be some there'd be some gross stuff or whatever,
Right.
or some language and things like that. And there's not really a lot of language in my book, but I said, if you're okay, if you would be okay with that, then you'd kind of be okay. But it's almost like you just have to, usually in my pitch, depending who I pitch it to, I kind of figure out, well, yeah, I think, this is kind of what it is. If you're okay with that, that's usually how I do it. I know some comics have ratings and stuff on it, but it's nothing like the movies where there's a definite rating system. So it's kind of like, it's not mandatory or anything. So it's just kind of like whatever you want to do.
Definitely, I feel the comics, it's whatever you do in a comic, it's not going to be as bad as something like in a movie. Like if the same thing happens in a comic book, it feels more detached slightly. I don't know, somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some abstraction in illustration. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what were you saying, Scott?
Oh, I was going to say that's a whole other challenge as far as I find it's harder to tell a scary story in comics than it would be either in prose or in movies, maybe. Because I mean, you can do stuff with page turns, and I've seen it done well, but I've seen it where people just it's not, it doesn't always work on that level, because it is kind of it's sort of an uphill battle to make, I think, a really good kind of scary comic. So
yeah, that's true.
You're just creating that atmosphere and everything. So when it's done well, it's cool. And I think you've done a really good job with that. With just the way the book's presented and everything. I would definitely recommend anyone definitely check out the Kickstarter. There's a link in the description and everything. So go there, check it out, and watch the video. And I think you'll get if you're a fan of horror anthologies, this is kind of an interesting one. So, but with that, I don't know, before we kind of wrap things up, Joe, is there anything else that you wanted to, obviously you pitch your book, but is there anything that you wanted to kind of talk about or mention that we didn't get to?
Oh, I think we covered it pretty well. I mean, just everybody, if you're interested in this type of thing, go check out the Kickstarter. Links down below. Yeah, just check it out. I mean, I think the video, if you get just go watch the video, I think that'll give you a pretty good feel for it, and kind of give you a good feeling of what it's all about, and maybe throw a couple bucks our way, and how about a little indie comic. I'm trying to get started here, so
yeah, definitely, and you're doing pretty good. I mean, you're sort of halfway to your goal. You're probably about halfway through the campaign, but definitely we want to fund this thing. So definitely check it out. And also Joe's social media links are in the description. So yeah, with that, if there's not anything else, then we'll just kind of, I guess we'll sort of close it out. So Corey, where can everyone find you?
You can find my stuff at CoreyKerr.com. I've got some new phone cases up there and a couple new designs on different things. And if you want to follow along for the research and the reasons why I'm making the things that I'm making, little video essays and articles, then you can go to CoreyKerr.com/email. Jump onto my email newsletter. I have personally seen several people who thought they were already on the email newsletter not be on the email newsletter, and they're like, oh, I thought I was already subscribed. So check to see if you are subscribed, because if you're not, you probably want to be. So jump on there, CoreyKerr.com/email. Stick your email there at the top, and it'll sign you up for that.
Yeah. So I want to address a couple comments here. So Keeman says, so it looks like Josh isn't going to come through, I'm assuming. Yeah, we don't know where Josh is, but we do. With that being said, I do want to mention we're on Josh's channel right now. So definitely check out what he's doing. He's got a number of graphic novels that he's either working on, or he's got out there 2 stories, Jacob's Apartment, and I don't know if I don't know if he has links built in already. I'm not sure, but definitely check out stuff, and check out his live streams. He does live streams all the time, shows his drawing process here on his channel. So check out what Josh is doing. And then Christopher had a comment. So our friend Gary, I forgot about this. I should have mentioned this earlier, Joe, but you were talking about different, like, how do you let people know? Our friend Gary puts it's like a little warning, like he'll have, like, if and it's kind of like like he usually has like 3 warnings on each of his book on the bottom. Like one will be like, he'll have like animal cruelty, and it shows like a fly swatter swatting a fly, or whatever it is. He's got his 3 little things, and it's usually kind of humorous that he puts on the back. So that's kind of a smart way to do it, I think, too. So because there is no standard rating system, you can kind of do whatever you want, and you can do like Gary does and kind of have be a little tongue in cheek too. So, yeah. So, and then as far as me, you can find my videos on my YouTube channel, Cirqueworks Art Labs on YouTube. I am currently reverse engineering nostalgia from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I've done like wax packs. I mean, basically this kind of stuff. If you're familiar with this book here, like X-ray glasses, all this stuff, these are all things that eventually I want to recreate, but I kind of put my own spin on them and everything. So that kind of stuff, that's what I'm currently doing on my YouTube channel. Plus I've got my series, Making Comics 101. If you're a comic book artist or writer or want to learn how to do comics or write or illustrate comics, you can check out that series. It's like, I think there's like a total of 72 episodes in total. So just tons of stuff on there. Or you can go to my website at cirqueworks.com, where I have digital tools, brushes, templates, all that kind of stuff for making comics. And then my own comic, Young and the Dead. It's a kids versus zombie adventure story. Think Goonies meets Night of the Living Dead. And then this show, the Artcasters, we do this show every single week. It kind of changed times. We're currently doing, I would say for the foreseeable future, it might go back at some point, but just for the time being, we'll be doing these on Sundays. But we'll have different guests. We'll have, it'll be on it could be on a different channel. It could be on Corey's channel or Josh's channel or whatever. But that can get a little confusing. So the easiest way to figure out, who the guest is going to be, what the topic, all that stuff, is just join our mailing list for Artcasters. There's a link in the description for that. We don't spam you or anything like that. Usually about at least a half hour before we go live, we try to push that out and let you know we're going live, and like I said, what the topic, the guest, and what channel it's going to be on, because YouTube doesn't always notify people. So check that out. And again, thanks, Joe, for coming on. Thanks, Joe, for sharing your Kickstarter, and definitely go check it out. Support indie comics, and we will see. And thanks to everyone in the chat. So, and hopefully next time Josh will be here. I'm very curious to find. My money is on the fact that he was just so exhausted that he was going to take a small nap, and he kind of overslept. So. But we'll see when he chimes back in. He might even, knowing Josh, he might come back on and do a live stream after, and he'll explain the whole thing. So he usually does these late night live streams. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you probably next Sunday, I'm guessing. So later, everyone.
See ya.